Hi, so today let's talk carnivores in Loricariidae, so in plex. And these are so forgotten. Loricariidae are often considered algivores and stuff like that. Although this itself is a misconception, the majority of them do feed on algae and detritus. Detritus is kind of a vague group of different things. And while there's also misconceptions actually really about what is a carnivore, what's an omnivore and stuff like that. So generally in Hypostominae, which is the sort of more traditional plex, the true carnivores that you'll see will be Scobian and cistrus. So this is a sunshine plec, also known as Goldie plec, and that also Scobian and cistrus palilopsis, something like that. And they're traditional sort of, they're more molluscivores, given their head shape, it's very pointed to kind of work around that. Loricariidae also is more focused and designed for mollusks, but both will eat a whole variety of different insects as well. Although mollusks aren't insects, I know that. And lastly, you've got Pseudocanthicus, and they will eat a whole range of different invertebrates and stuff like that. Also, they have been said to feed on sponges. When you look at the teeth of these three genera, they tend to have more sparse teeth and they tend to be very hooked. And this, I find, they have very longer mouths that have more manoeuvrability around their food. I wouldn't always say necessarily prey. And I think especially in Scobian and cistrus and Loricariidae, where they're trying to work around eggs, snails. In the other subfamilies, you've got, especially sort of in Loricariidae, you've got Pseudohemiodon, Planilocoria. A lot of the bottom feeder ones especially are a lot more carnivorous, and these have different morphology. These ones they are feeding on invertebrates in the substrate. They've got those large barbels, and these are a lot more for for reproduction, but possibly, I guess, for prey detection in the substrate. Although catfish have this amazing ability to taste over a wide area. So when it comes to carnivores, it's actually a lot more easier to feed. And generally, also when it comes to omnivores being stuff like those, maybe a bit more on the carnivorous side, but still omnivores, stuff like Hypostominae, Pecotia, or Pocoltia. I would say Hemi and cistrus are more omnivores, but maybe a bit more towards the middle, and stuff like that. So a lot of these tend to be a lot easier to feed because they're a lot more willing to try different things, and a lot of dry diets and diets available are actually more carnivorous in texture and in ingredients. So obviously first one, Deja Vu, always on Vitalis' ingredients. Great for fattening up fish, not great for a long-term diet. So it's high in fish and fish derivatives in all of them. And it is also, I would say, reasonably high in vegetables, so it's kind of not great even for carnivores long term. And the issue with this is also, as you look at carnivores, they tend to have a different gut morphology, different mouth morphology. They are highly evolved for what they're eating. And a lot are wild caught still. Even if they were captive bred, it would take a lot of sort of selective breeding or genetic drift from actually to move out of that. So diets like Vitalis I would avoid really for long term, but they will feed very willingly. Unlike a lot of the herbivores, quite a few of them are a little bit more fussy and are a lot more prone to bloat. So for carnivores though, what would you feed them? Well, I think they give a little bit more excitement with feeding. Watching herbivores feed isn't great. So I would always say avoid fish meals, and also I'd reduce any frozen krill, any frozen mussels, any frozen, or live of the other, and whitebait, anything that's high in thiaminase. So thiaminase is a enzyme and it breaks down the vitamin thiamine. Thiamine is really useful in a lot of physiological functions, biological functions, stuff like how neurons work in the body, and it can result in stunting and eventually sort of death and neurological damage. It can look a bit, I guess, like a few other things like swim bladder disorder, but it's not. So the way to, if you're wanting to feed those things, they have to be cooked, because that will reduce highly the amount of thiaminase in the actual diet. There's plenty of things that do not contain thiaminase, and these I would actually encourage, because stuff like insects and invertebrates is a more natural diet. So stuff like what's these again? Crickets. I should know that. So crickets are brilliant high in B12, and I think really the carnivores is getting a lot more variety in. With herbivores, algae contain so much nutrients, it's a little bit, I would say it makes it easier. And then you've got stuff like plenty of frozen foods that come in blister packs. You can also get them in sheets, a whole variety of different ones. I go for tuberflex, a bit of bloodworm. I wouldn't rely on bloodworm at all, it's quite difficult to digest as a chitin, which in case it's a lot of insects, that can make it a bit difficult to digest. But I would say that's the same with most insects, you kind of grinding them down would help. But chitin, I think, is more fibre than nutrients, so just going for a whole range of frozen foods. And I literally go through the frozen food thing, I'm like, I'll have that, and just keep it avoiding the thiaminase rich ones, because I don't know where else thiaminase could be coming from. Like, it could be coming from some other thing, but generally dry and gel diets are fine. And you can feed a little bit, I would say there's no harm in feeding a little bit of algae actually in the diet. They probably are feeding on quite a few with time. So there's plenty of pellets and stuff, a lot of them, like I've got EBO, I've got these is the sponge food, and that is, so this is high in fish and fish derivatives. I don't know the rest of it, I don't read German. Stuff like this. And I'll feed, if you're going to feed it, you could say feeding a variety of different dry feeds is a good idea when it comes to that. The only thing is when a lot of dry feeds contain the exact same ingredients, and it's like you're not actually adding diversity into diet. I feed stuff like, well, I keep mostly herbivores, excluding a lot of the other catfishes, so the wood cats and stuff, and the Aspirinidae, the banjos. So I feed stuff like Repashy bottom scratcher. Repashy bottom scratcher is, I would say, borderline between the more carnivorous omnivores and the carnivores. It does contain a bit of algae, but it contains a whole variety of different invertebrate based feeds, ingredients. There is also grub pie. I believe this one doesn't contain any fish meal at all. So that one, so that's what I'd feed as a sort of basic to diet. You could feed, like, say, I would actually be interested in keeping a variety of different snails for the species to feed on and snack on, and kind of, because it just adds something for them, their brain just to work out. Another thing you could feed is stuff like maybe neocardinia shrimp they might pick at, although other fish tend to get there first. Like with all orcas, they say a quiet tank, they don't tend to compete too well against other fish. But carnivores, generally, they tend to be so much bigger. Leprocanthus josemi, which is your sultan pleco, that's probably your best choice at the smallest size, just because they only get to about 15 centimetre standard length, so that excludes the tail. So that's not a bad choice but you'd still need something like a 200 litre. When it comes to other things, then I'll probably go for more omnivorous in smaller tanks, but it gives you, with omnivorous, just mix the whole lot together, make sure there's plenty of algae, but there's also plenty of different invertebrates, and stuff like that. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope this video has been useful or interesting or given food for thought. But anyway, thank you for watching.